Well, hello everyone, and welcome to FinalBossTV. This is episode number 79 of your WoW Endgame rating show. My name is Adam K. My name is Adam K. aka Bay, and I will be your host today. Had a little bit of rustlings of jimmies and some goofiness before the show started, so I was a little flustered. But yeah, today we're talking about DPS DKs. Blood was a couple weeks ago, so that's enough of that nonsense. Let's get down to the other half of the class right now and see if there's the same problems we had originally and see if we have better things on the horizon for 6.2. Talking with Skullflower of Midwinter and Magdalena of Something Wicked. So before we do, let's get over there and introduce so there's Skullflower. Hi, sir. Hello. Welcome. Oh, I think are you muted? Oh, no. What? Wait.
What?
There you go.
Buzz?
I hear you. No buzz.
Hello?
There's the buzz. There's the buzz. Hello, sir. Welcome to the show.
How's it going?
Good, I think. I hope. Right? You all set for this?
I'm set. No food poisoning here.
Yeah, that's too bad. And then over here, of course, coming back for DPS DKs, as he was for Blood Death Knight, there's Magdalena. Hello, sir. Hello.
Hey there.
You all set for this, sir? You ready to go?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
How many rants do you have prepped for me? I want at least 7.
7? That's
Yeah.
nothing.
That's nothing?
49.
I think we have at least 42.
42 rants about, oh my goodness. All right, well, we'll get into those in a minute. Hang on, wait, hold on, wait, what is my music doing? Hold on, what's happening right now? My computer, like all my monitors just turned off?
Oh god, he's here.
Mags, Mags,
going
help
on?
me!
Oh god.
Mags, help me!
No. Oh no.
You thought that was escaping from me. I will always find you, Magdalena.
The beast returns.
No, who is that? Oh my goodness. Naz, what are you doing here? What is this happening? What is going on?
Well, I heard that Magdalena was going to be on the show, and he thought he could get away from me, and that's just not acceptable. And so here I am.
This is
to
why I
torment
refer
him.
to him as the eternal stalker.
Oh my gosh.
This is why we can't have nice things.
I am all the nice things you could ever want.
All of them?
All of them.
At the same time?
All at once, at the same time.
I mean,
every way, every day.
that top hat is pretty much the best. So I think we got there. Okay. Oh man, let me turn my monitors back on real quick here. I mean Kappa. What's happening? That was pretty good. Alrighty. So Naz is here to apparently moderate our two guests in real time, in real life, not just in text. So we'll see how. Crap.
In real ways.
In real ways, yes, indeed.
Oh, he wishes.
Oh,
Oh god.
oh my goodness.
It's
So
too early. It's
remember.
too early to start with our normal interactions. So give it time. Got to warm up.
Give it time. Well, I guess
Give
the
it
first thing I
time.
want to talk about real quick, I said we'll talk about PTR testing real quick. I have tested stuff on the 6.2 PTR. Skullflower, I would assume you have as well, sir. Anything you want to?
Yeah,
Give
of
the
course. We've
DK
been testing pretty much every boss.
Right.
Being in Midwinter, of course, we want to strive for those top world kills and so on.
So yeah, what do you have for the DK community? What have you seen so far in the testing? There's no set bonuses, no trinkets yet. But like the bosses we've tested so far, all 7 of them, how do they feel for DPS DK? Looking good? Bad?
I think
Awful?
they're pretty good. Like, I think Death Knights are in a really, really good spot right now. I think we should be happy with our tuning this expansion.
Okay. Yeah, people ask me about Enhanced Shaman so far, and I'm like, well, like, 2 fights have some AoE, so that's good, and the rest of them are all single target, or cleave, so that's bad. But hopefully we have a good balance of classes that are good. Everyone's always like, well, Fel Reaver or Iron Reaver or whatever is just terrible for everyone, so that's okay. He's bad
Yeah,
for ranged and melee.
It's too much movement.
Right. Absolutely. And Mags, I'm sure you've broken down some of the things coming up in 6.2. Do you have anything you want to like hint at chat that we'll jump into later, what we'll dive into with 6.2, what's coming for DKs?
I mean, the majority of work that I've been doing on the PTR has just been lots of testing and experimenting with, new trinkets, etc., set bonuses. I know that they aren't publicly available yet,
Right.
but I've been taking a look at, like mostly the individual mechanics for every trinket and what it means, not only for DKs but also for strength users in
Hmm.
general.
Right.
And in addition to trinkets, I've obviously been covering DK stuff, like the class changes, the legendary rings, of course, those got big changes. So I've been scrambling to try and, you know, rediscover all of that. And I've also been busy writing for Blizzard Watch as well.
That's right. Yeah, you have a whole bunch of articles actually for Blizzard Watch already. You have 3 or 42 apparently, maybe.
Not 42, no. Someday.
Someday, eventually, right? Yeah, there's a lot happening right now. I don't know. I mean, Naz and I are in similar like progression ruts right now. I'm not super excited for the legendary ring. Naz, do you have any opinions on the whole like one DPS clicks it and all DPS get the buff, and then the person that clicks the original ring like explodes for all the damage that accumulates over the course of that proc? I don't know. Do you have anything you want to share?
Personally, I'm not too excited about it. I mean, at the moment, I'm just trying to enjoy our black hand progression.
Mm.
Being a melee is just, you stare at the wall and that's doing your job, and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of excitement there.
Yeah, there's a lot of standing around waiting for demolishers to shoot at you.
Oh yeah,
Mm.
dancing in fire.
Pretty much. So, well, we'll see. We have a lot more to talk about for 6.2, but I want to go into this first off. So I always have to ask all the classes going into Draenor now how their transition from Mist of Pandaria to Warlords of Draenor happened. Everyone get that whole ability pruning and consolidation of abilities and buffs and things and whatever. So there's a couple of things I guess that happened to Death Knights, but were any of these like incredibly big? So Horn of Winter doesn't generate RP anymore. Raised Dead's for Unholy only. Dark Command is now for Blood only, which I think is awkward because Red Paladin can still taunt.
Yeah, we can still taunt with Death Grip, so it's not a huge deal.
Okay. So anything else on these lists that like is a big deal for how?
I mean, this wasn't really pruning so much, but one huge change that Death Knights got was that we had a number of abilities that depended on the presence of diseases on targets to do full damage. These abilities were Heart Strike, Obliterate, Scourge Strike, and also Blood Boil at the time. That's gone now. We no longer need diseases to act as semi-combo points, and that
Right.
actually had huge consequences for for the whole class, but I would say especially for Unholy. And then, of course, Raised Dead being removed from Frost and Blood was, in my opinion, a big mistake. That I do love soloing as Blood, and I've been ranting so much about how I missed the Ghoul because it was such a useful tool.
Yeah.
And
That's-
I would say, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say like that's one thing I saw in these that like only the Unholy Death Knight, which is already the pet class of the whole class itself, only gets the Ghoul, but like you're still, I don't know why the other ones just can't res it still, because it's still like a integral part of feeling like a Death Knight, no?
Yeah, no,
Well, we
absolutely.
still
I
have
agree.
Army of the Dead.
Well, more like Army of the Useless.
True.
Quiet, yes. But what do you else you have before I cut you off, Mags? What else?
I was just saying that another major change was that Pestilence and Blood Bowl were merged into one, and that's technically something we've been asking for a pretty long time.
Right.
So that was one change that I was very happy about.
Now, I think on that note, too, with the whole, like, Pestilence and Blood Boil being merged together, I think we did cry enough during the beta period that blood actually blood boils instead of Pestilence spamming, which just felt really goofy. So that's okay. But then, obviously, Frost and Unholy now, you Blood Boil for your AoE rah-rah. Unholy Frenzy was removed. I mean,
Not missed in the least. Good
Yeah.
riddance.
good riddance.
Definitely
Good
not.
riddance.
Skullflower
That
agrees.
ability was just so annoying to deal with, like having to stagger its use because of heroism, and like those two buffs just don't act well with each other. So it's a good thing that was removed. We still have like Gargoyle as our 3-minute cooldown, so nothing's missed.
Nothing is missed. I know back in the first incarnation of Unholy Frenzy is you can give it to other people. So it was always like, well, I make the best benefit of it. No, I make the best
Well,
benefit of it. No,
you still
I do.
could. I mean,
Right.
just to be
yeah.
clear, you still could. The problem
Right.
was that for all of Cataclysm, it counted as an Enrage. And as you know, the Fury Warrior Mastery at the time was benefiting more from Enrage effects. And that was something that I know that you're very unhappy about.
Yeah, because couldn't it be like tranked and dispelled like awkwardly too? Because it didn't. It was. I guess it was weird. And at first, it like hurts you too to use it. Like what the hell?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So not a big deal. I guess the one weird thing I saw is like Death Coil removed from Frost DKs now. So does that like hurt like maybe ranged movement options for like runic power dumps? Because you obviously can't Frost Strike unless you're in melee.
I mean, Death Coil usage as Frost was really situational, so it's not much is lost there.
Okay. It's a loss, but not a huge one. I would say that you know, if you asked me to prioritize what I was more annoyed about, it would definitely be Raised Dead over Death Coil.
Oh, okay. What'd you have there, Naz? You had something?
No, I agree with Skull and Mags. Death Coil for Frost was kind of a nice thing to have if you're out of range, but what Frost had was Howling Blast, and that kind of trumped Death Coil usage.
Sure.
So,
depending on how you run away.
Good riddance.
So it looks like it's a pretty positive amount of pruning and moving around of abilities and whatnot. So nothing over pruned or under pruned are things.
I would say under pruned absolutely. Actually, I would say that there needed to be more pruning. I've ranted about this for so long. Plague Strike and Icy Touch are my top abilities that I would nominate for further pruning, because there's literally nothing that they do that other abilities that can't do or can't be slightly refashioned to do.
Right.
And in my opinion, they've just become so vestigial at this point. And it's a little ironic because Blizzard was talking about wanting to simplify how people understand classes. Well, here we have a class with 4 or 5 different ways to apply diseases, and Plague Strike and Icy Touch, just this odd leftover from Wrath, whereby they used to be very important rotationally, but not anymore.
And it seems because with a new talent that can remove the use of either one of them depending on what spec you are, like you just remove Icy Touch from. I mean, you level up and you earn them, so like they're kind of relics. But Enhanced Shaman has that, which we have a smaller version of Storm Strike. So, but you don't use that eventually. So I wonder if there needs to be ways like you use them for leveling, and then you eventually don't use them anymore. But I don't know how they would.
I mean, sure, but I don't think that anybody is going to dispute the fact that leveling a Death Knight is a mess right now. Just the way in which the flow feels, the abilities you gain, the passives you gain is so strange because they've barely changed it since Wrath.
That is true. I mean, I haven't played my Death Knight since I think Cataclysm, so it is weird. That's like the whole feel of this show. And everyone in chat will eventually feel like, unless you already do, because you play Death Knight, there are a lot of things that just like feel like they're just like pushed in. Like the Death Knight's a giant clay model, and they keep adding clay to it. Like just put that there, get that in there, put that up there, smooth that out a little bit, but then leave the rest of the other side. Just get it in there. And that's sort of how the class feels so far. Whereas it needs a little bit more, like you said, more pruning, a little more streamlining of abilities and things. Maybe not as much caking in of so much power to just make the class, workable. It's kind of weird.
Yeah,
so that go ahead.
It feels like DKs are more, or at least the way the devs have designed them, they're fun towards the end game. I think the leveling experience of a new DK is a lot to be desired. I mean, we have a lot of carryover from the leveling days, Icy Touch and things like that. But if you've tried leveling a DK now, it's probably the most frustrating experience ever.
Really?
Yeah.
I think it's like an interesting challenge to do. It sounds like a fun little weekend. Just like to level how much? Like all the way to 90? Just from level start to 90, or is it like the
Iron Man Death Knight challenge?
Yeah, exactly.
DK to 100.
I don't know. It sounds interesting. I've never heard. I only bring that up because I've never heard of the class say their whole process of how they grow and evolve, because you're the only hero class in the game. Is that different? That's weird.
I mean, it's hard to learn your mechanics and rotation because of the rate in which you gain your talents. You don't get Blood Tap or Runic Corruption or any of the rune regen talents until later on, and without those, it's pretty rough playing.
Right.
I don't even think you get your Unholy presence until level 70 something.
Exactly.
What the hell? What real?
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense.
You don't get your... Oh, that's right. Presences are staggered because they used to be that each presence was its own thing and you used to be able to do anything in each of the 3 presences.
Right, exactly.
Why don't you just start out with all 3 now? Because if you want to play as an Unholy, that's that's kind of weird. That's... When do you pick what spec you play as?
I think it's right away.
Okay.
58. No. So actually, sorry, no, that's wrong. That's around level 56 because the first few quests are still in the ebb and hold, and you gain lots of experience just by talking to people. And I think as soon as you get your first talent point, you're able to choose.
But you don't get your presences, so you can be on Unholy Death Knight with no Unholy Presence for like 20 levels.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, nice. That's weird, man. That's a weird transition. I don't know. We'll see if that gets improved in the future. Everyone keeps like harping over like we're gonna go back to the old world, the next expansion. Then they're gonna like redo Wrath of the Lich King content because they redid vanilla, like they'll redo BC and Wrath content or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, right. We'll see. So speaking of transitions, so Highmaul to Blackrock Foundry is a thing. Obviously, Highmaul is eons past this point right now, but like the DK different side of when you would be two-hand Frost or dual-wield Frost or Unholy has sort of wavered a little bit. I don't know. So Frost to me, looking at it right now, is just like really overly procky. Like there's RNG with Killing Machine. There's different weights where you put your priorities on two-hand or dual-wield Frost. As this just sort of how the class is? Who wants to talk on Frost?
Sure, you could argue that Frost is overly procky, but that's just the nature of how two-handed Frost is and how it's designed to make it like a fun and engaging spec to play instead of like some standard static rotation. It's kind of more of like a whack-a-mole playstyle, and if you don't like it, then you can just switch to more fast-paced playstyle like Machine Gun Howling Blast with dual wield, or maybe something more consistent with Unholy. But like overall, I kind of like it. I mean, you aren't just waiting for these procs to happen. You also have to micromanage your resources, like pulling your runes in preparation for Killing Machine proc and not letting these resources cap and so on. So it's not just like you're simply smashing one button over and over. There's a lot more to it.
The real issue at hand over here is that Frost is simply very, very undertuned right now. Therefore, I would say that there hasn't been much change from Highmaul to Blackrock Foundry in that, the majority of DPS DKs were going Unholy then, and they're still Unholy right now.
Yep.
And I mean, if that's just how it is for now, and that's how it'll remain prior to buffs.
Yeah, I don't. Well, you say prior to buffs, but Unholy has so much almost try to be powerful baked into the class all over the place, and it's still not good enough. Is it because it's not smooth enough like Unholy is? Like you buff your pet, you both do damage, you dot everything, you win the game. Like you blood boiled AoE. Like Unholy is just like you have choices. But with Frost,
I think the problem is that like with Frost, there's two different playstyles within the spec. So the issue is that they're trying to balance these two specs as well as balance it with Unholy, and it's just not working out.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing. Like I was setting up the show notes and I was looking at this. No other class, I guess you could argue that Protection Warrior has Gladiator now, which is the same part of the same spec where you can do one or the other. But no other DPS class has two DPS roles in one specialization. Because two-hand Frost does play differently than dual-wield Frost, but you're still a Frost Death Knight, which is cool. But I can imagine that might be a design nightmare to try to make both versions of just different weapons worthwhile.
Yeah. I mean, it's caused issues with stat balance. It's caused issues where, if just to give you an example, Obliterate is a massive amount of 200 Frost's damage. It's hardest hitting strike, and yet in the past we've had cases where Obliterate has been phased out of the dual wielding Frost rotation, just because it doesn't scale with our mastery. Howling Blast and Frost Strike end up overtaking it, etc., etc. And it's just I mean, I respect that the desire behind what they want to do, but unfortunately it hasn't worked out very well.
Yeah. And that's a good thing too. I'm looking at chat right now. Hina Lover, Windwalker brings up that monks can do one hand or they can do dual wield or two hand, but there's like no difference. Like it doesn't do anything to their class. Like they don't have to worry about how their weapons interact and how they do damage. So It's a good point. I don't know.
I mean, the problem with how Frost functions is that the play style and the rotation changes when you go from dual wield to two-handed Frost, and that's part of the issue with the balancing, is that when they try to balance one ability based off of one play style, it indirectly affects the other play style.
Sure, absolutely. No, that's totally true.
I think that's the main issue there. There's no like really good tuning knob to actually balance both the specs without having an effect on the other playstyle.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have to see if they're trying to do that with the 6.2 trinket, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible.
I mean, there's also... Sorry, go ahead.
There you go.
I was just going to say that there's also the fact that Frost has some fundamental mechanical flaws. And it's ironic that I'm saying this because for the longest time, when I first became active in the community, it was very early Cataclysm. And at that time, what I was often saying was that Frost was way better designed than Unholy. Unholy had so many problems, etc., etc. And it did. And then, thankfully, over a period of 2 expansions, which I suppose it took a little longer than it needed to, but we're at a point where Unholy has had a lot of its mechanical issues fixed and addressed, and where it plays a lot more smoothly than it once did. Frost, however, has not had that. The new playstyle that was added was done so with absolutely 0 new abilities, no changes to how abilities work at all.
Yeah. That has to be a weird frustration. And that's sort of, I guess, why every DPS DK right now is just Unholy. And yeah, did you guys, so are there fights in BRF that any of you went Frost? Like, does Frost have a fight type that actually is better to be Frost than Unholy?
Frost was actually good back in Highmaul. I think we used it for, Butcher and one other fight. But once they buffed Unholy Scourge Strike damage and Festering Strike damage, we just never looked back at Frost and always sticked with Unholy.
And this is in light of the huge Frost buff that just happened with all the mythic changes and when BRF was getting tweaked again a couple weeks ago. So it's still nothing you can think of even that would be good for Frost and BRF then?
No. It's just pretty much a dead spec at this point.
Anyway, yeah.
That's so weird to me. It's really weird to me. So then I guess on the strengths of just a DPS DK in general, so there are things that a DK brings, right? So Gorfine's Grasp is always like a big contentious point of like, oh, gotta bring a DK for Gorfine's Grasp on this fight and that fight and whatever. Is that like a big thing to like erase spot war for having like Death Grip and then of course Gorfine's Grasp? Like, does that do something?
I mean, it's great if you have a DK to Gorfiends for fights like maybe Thogar or Blast Furnace, but like it isn't going to make or break your strategy, especially when you have other knockback effects and things like Nature's Vortex to sort of accomplish the same sort of thing with grouping and moving ads.
In Mists of Pandaria, you did have several fights that hinged on Gorfine's Grasp, but thus far that hasn't been the case. There's been no fight where, Gorfine's absolutely made an encounter. Like, Heroic Lei Shen, you needed to, 2 grips to coordinate with those sparks.
Right.
Siegecrafter, bombs, etc., etc. That hasn't been the case, so far.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I mean, then I put in the notes AMZ, which has sort of been neutered over and over and over again. It's kind of an only good cooldown to like couple with something else. So I don't think AMZ. It is the point of AMZ right now, though, that I bring up is that we're living now in the era where we're about to be without Fox and without Amp Magic. So you're looking at DPS classes that actually bring raid-oriented cooldowns. I'm not gonna even bring up AG for Shaman. It's poop anyway. But you've got Smoke Bomb and Rally and AMZ. And that's about it. So
AMZ is sort of like a joke of a talent, to be honest.
Is
it? It really is. No, I mean, I think it's atrocious, and I know that after that's been in the past, but making us choose between a raid cooldown and personal survivability, I think was pretty much just done, just to say that oh, look at this class is different. I'm sorry, but that's a horrible choice. It's not a fun choice, and it's not even a compelling choice right now because of how weak AMZ is.
Right.
It's funny because in 5.4, AMZ got a big redesign whereby it became a lot closer to what Devo Aura was. I believe that Devo Aura was 20% magic damage reduction at the time for 6 seconds. AMZ was 40% for 3 seconds, but it was localized. Devo Aura just got buffed to include all types of damage.
Yeah, buff a
AMZ
little
has
bit,
gotten
little
no
bit of
such
buff.
thing.
Yeah, a little bit of a buff. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder. I mean, Naz, our progression is similar, like on our timeline here. So have you ever had issues with how your guild was like making you take AMZ or anything in particular that made you have to like worry about being a DK or just do your own thing?
The only one time it mattered was when, BR was fresh in our minds and hearts. I think it was the phase 1 transition when Blackhand would bring down the Iron Star and the raid would take massive raid-wide damage. That was probably the only time I had to really take AMZ.
Ah, right, all right.
Situationally, Flamebender during the Flame Storm, or whatever it's called, just to help out healers. But it was consumed and destroyed so quickly that it kind of like it was a waste of a cooldown. Yeah,
no, it gets popped so quickly. The Iron Star dropping for phase 1 to phase 2, Blackhand makes sense. That's about the only place I can really think of that could be that good. Yeah, because it is just like a pop. Like it'll disappear and absorb all this damage in that instant, and it's over. Yeah.
I'll put it this way: what are the chances that your raid is not going to have either a Devo or a bubble?
Exactly.
Given how powerful Disc Bubble is right now, and Disc is, and also Holy I know isn't as powerful, but it's still decent enough. The chances of you not having at least one of those two in your raid are pretty slim.
Right. Yeah, and Skull, do you have anything from a Midwinter perspective on like min-maxing class balance on certain fights? Was that ever a thing that you was taking perspective when you were doing progression?
I think we mostly focus on bringing like a ton of hunters and rogues for most of these encounters. I don't think we really prioritize raid cooldowns or anything like that beyond anything crazy.
Ugh, yeah. So I guess not a big deal. I do wonder how the raid, not only strategies, but cooldown usage will change now without Amp and Fox. Because I know that like the very few holy priests that are out there and all the rest of druids are now pretty concerned, I guess. Because normally you would trank with an Amp or even trank with a Fox, so you could actually do it when you're moving. So we'll have to see. So there are any BRF encounters that DKs were just at in particular? Weaker at than other classes, or?
I would definitely have to say Mythic Blackhand. Like, depending on your strategy, that fight is just a complete nightmare for melee with the amount of damage that demolitions do in phase 1, or having to kite the boss and the tanks around phase 2, or pretty much being useless in phase 3 because rogues are just simply superior at soaking things with feint. It's just a really, really melee unfriendly fight.
And that,
but to be fair, that's also, I mean, we're not alone in there. The Red Paladins, Warriors, etc., are also as upset as we are with that fight.
But the challenge to that is at least the Paladins could bring a useful raid CD.
Well, they have lots of useful raid CDs. Yeah. I mean, Paladins bring bops.
I mean, DKs, you kind of spec for survivability. You got to survive into the different phases.
I mean, I'll quote somebody from Acherus. This is Verisa, who plays a DK called Veristraz in Paragon.
Mm-hmm.
When he first killed Blackhand, he said very clearly that the only reason that we brought a Death Knight in the first place was surely for damage. There is no other point in bringing, a DK as far as raid utility goes, etc., etc.
Yeah. And yeah, chat's getting confused. I don't think Naz meant raid, not a raid cooldown, but cooldowns for your raid. All Paladins bring really useful hands. So.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the thing. Because you can bop during the demolition in phase 1, and you can just stand in demolition and not take damage. So that's incredibly important, again, for helping tranks. So, yeah. Whereas a DK just, again, like Max said, just brings damage. Now, was that obviously just being a Holy Death Knight to bring damage?
Yep.
That Reese around? Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yep. So, we'll have to see if that changes. I'm going to move us along to itemization in Blackrock Foundry. Now, we talked about it like in the Spec story and like the differences between Frost and Holy in that regard, and everyone's just on Holy right now. So your sub bonuses, I guess, still didn't help the separation there, even though what's interesting is that the Frost bonuses on your Tier 17 set, the Ogre Skull Boneplate Battle Gear, is actually better than the Unholy ones. So the Unholy set bonuses are your 2-piece is 40% additional damage while Dark Transformation is active for your ghoul. And then when Soul Reaper deals its bonus damage, you get 5 stacks of Shadow Infusion to quickly get your Dark Transformation back to your ghoul. And then when your 4 pieces, your Dark Transformation is active, one of your runes will automatically refresh as a death rune. I guess it's kind of a thing. But then you told me that the Frost ones, which are Pillar of Frost activation, is plus 30 runic power, and then when you're in Pillar of Frost, your special attacks trap the souls in your weapon, and when Pillar of Frost fades, you basically explode at your current target for 30% of the damage per soul. And those are better than the Unholy ones. So if Frost set bonuses are that good, better than the Unholy, but it's still not good enough to make the class worth it.
Yeah, like just based off simulation results, I think Unholy's tier is actually the weakest tier bonuses out of every class.
Yeah.
So that's like a pretty large indicator of how bad they actually are.
Ugh.
And Unholy's 4-piece is actually pretty awful to play with because most of the time we don't need to proc a rune when we want to use Dark Transformation.
Exactly.
Because it could lead to overcapping our resources and so on. So yeah, they're pretty awful tier bonuses for Unholy.
And also, I mean, let's be clear that 40% Dark Transformation bonus was only tacked on at the very end, like right as BRF came out.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, before that, it was just when Soul Reaper explodes, you gain 5 stacks of Shadow Infusion, which is an awful bonus.
Yeah. I think that was what it was. I think back when they were doing the SimCraft testing, which again, everyone, SimCraft is a tool to be used, but not to be sworn by. They were looking at the DPS increase bonuses for all the different 2 pieces and 4 pieces of all classes and specs in the game. And I saw like mine was like, yay, 600. But then the Unholy ones were like less than that for both. I was like, oof, that's rough. How do they let that go live, man? How do they not know? How do they not know that?
Oh, they knew.
They knew.
And that was the problem.
Because was Unholy just that much powerful that they gave you weaker set bonuses on purpose? That can't be a thing.
No. I think it was just a matter of trying to be clever and saying, oh, look, Unholy is a pet spec, so let's try and design bonuses around that pet theme without actually thinking about what the consequences would be or about how the numbers actually will play out. And that's what resulted in this.
Well, you could argue that maybe they try to balance the bonuses around how good Unholy is performing right now.
I would hope not. I mean, I guess, so in that regard then, if you're going to play a Frost DK, I would assume you go for all 4 pieces. Which off-piece would you slot? What piece is not the most optimal?
That depends on if you're two-handed or dual-wield.
Oh, wow, it really does? Holy crap. Yeah. Okay, so...
Your stats are completely different between those 2 weapon choices.
Wow. So what's the off-piece then for dual-wield Frost Skull?
Dual-wield Frost prioritizes the shoulder off-piece from Blackhand, whereas two-handed prioritizes the haste legs from Flamebender.
Okay. All right, that's pretty straightforward. What about Unholy then? Like, I guess, do you take all 4 pieces at all, or do you take 2-piece?
Yeah, you take 4 pieces.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but you don't rush to the 4-piece. You basically defer it to the other classes that can use the token. It just works out that way.
Yeah? So what is your off-piece then for Unholy Skull?
It's the same as Dual Frost. We take the Mastery Multi-Strike Shoulders.
Shoulders off of Blackhand? Okay. All right. Well, that's weird. That is so interesting to me that the Frost itemization is that different that you would actually really change that. I'm sure it goes from everything else too. Are there any trinkets of note with Frost or Unholy that you...
With trinkets, it's sort of like the same story because we have 2 multi-strike trinkets and then we have 1 mastery trinket. Right. So because of that stat difference between the specs, we want to change our trinkets based on... For Unholy, we would switch them based on if we're single target damage or AoE damage, and then Frost would switch them based on if you're doing two-handed or dual-wield.
Now, but to make sure, you're only using the 3 Blackrock Foundry trinkets, right? You're not actually holding over anything from Highmaul?
No, most of the Highmaul stuff was pretty bad, with the exception of Scabbard. But Scabbard is also lower, lower, level. So thankfully, we replaced that. Although it's still best in stuff for challenge modes.
Right. That's its own ball of wax. We're not gonna get into. I'm sure there's plenty there. But that's what I was curious about because technically, like hunters can still hold over on a Highmaul trinket, and I guess a couple other classes can still if they have a Warforged Mythic. Versus BRF trinkets, which I'm not doing as an Enhanced Shaman. There's no way. But That's good. That's here. Just to know that you're not holding any Highmaul trinkets, DKs. Just go with the 3 BRF trinkets. All right. That's good to know. Speaking of trinkets, though, we talked about this a little earlier in the show, and I want to get a little back into 6.2 because these are kind of crazy. So
Pretty crazy.
a little bit. So the DK trinket coming in 6.2, which drops off Archimon. Spoiler alert. It's just a class-based trinket, right? So if you get one, it works for all 3 of your specs as your class, or 4.
Yeah.
If you're a druid. So the Frost trinket is your obliterates will deal 25% additional damage as Frost. Now I'm going to pause here and go one at a time, because that's a pretty big deal for 2-hand. Am I correct?
Well, I want to point out just 2 things. First of all, that 25% number that you quoted was assuming 695 item level.
Sure, of course.
So the majority of us are probably going to, well, I shouldn't say the majority, but I know that most of us are going to be going into
With the heroic
or mythic, and that's where it'll be even more powerful. It is pretty potent, and yes, more so for 2-handed than for dual wielding, because the fact that it deals additional damage as frost damage means that it scales with our mastery, which is something that I just, I said earlier, we've been complaining about for so long, for so long. In addition, it affects the additional damage of obliterate crits and multi-strikes. It's huge. I mean, it's a really big gain. I think that the last time that I simmed it, it was roughly an 8k gain for 200 frost.
On the heroic version of the trinket, that's 22% damage,
no,
right?
actually on the normal version.
On the normal version, that's 18%,
Yeah.
right? 18? I think it's 18% additional damage, I want to say.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it again, but...
And let's be clear, there is, of course, one big drawback, which is that it's solely for single target. It does not work well.
Of course.
Or I should say, it doesn't work at all for AoE.
But is that what Frost needs, though? Because obviously you're going to have lots of Howling Blasts worked into your rotation. So is the single target bonus the good benefit there, though? Like, is that...
I'm a little ambiguous about it. Yes, I would like something that would help us with AoE as well. Don't get me wrong. And I also independently believe that Howling Blast needs a much bigger buff than it currently has in the PTR. But with that being said, the fact that it's still something that we've been complaining about for so long, I mean, I'll put it this way. It doesn't hold a candle to the Unholy bonus, which I'm sure you'll discuss in a bit.
Well,
but
right.
It's decent.
I wanted to make sure that Skull, Naz, anything to add on the Frost one coming in 6.2?
I would just say that the Frost one is really interesting in that it could potentially lead to dual wield switching the rotation to a more obliterate heavy playstyle instead of the Howling Blast spam that it does now.
And that's sort of a weird point because obliterate's obviously weaker if you're dual wield Frost, but dual wield Frost prioritizes more mastery orientation because you're getting more Frost strikes. So that is interesting. I wonder. We'll have to see. Naz, anything on that?
Yeah, and I would caution people before they make up their minds is that this is still early PTR. And
right, of course.
Those numbers are most likely going to change. It, like Mag said, it's an 8K gain is substantial.
A little bit.
And it'll be pretty mind-blowing if they let it go live. And so I would, again, caution, don't base your, I guess, future plans based off what's going on now.
Right. One of my mods I should bring up in chat right now, Daniel is saying that he's looking at the normal is 25, heroic is 28.75, and mythic is 33. I thought I looked on the PTR, though, and I had the mythic boss looking at, and it says 25 for mythic. So maybe I guess they're not finalized then yet, because the data mine version looks like it's different from the PTR dungeon journal, so we'll have to see. Because that makes me want to know if 33%, that's a lot on mythic one. But of course, when you get the mythic Archimon trinket, you're already on farm anyway, so who cares? So you're looking at the heroic one as being your progression trinket. 28.75 or 7.4, pretty good. So the Unholy trinket, obviously very flavorful in the fact that your disease ticks while you're Unholy have a 30% chance to trigger Wandering Plague. If you were a DK of note of old, you remember you used to have this. This is a different version, a little weaker than it used to be, but still pretty good. When you trigger the Wandering Plague, you deal the same damage against the target, and then it explodes around that target for 8 yards, split evenly like a meteor. So it dissipates evenly, of course, around other targets. But still, Skullflower, you tested this so far. Pretty good trinket, yeah?
Yeah, it's really, really good. I feel that it's maybe a little too strong. Like, I did some simulations recently, and it's just absolutely insane for AoE. It's going to play really, really well with Necrotic Blight and Holy, and I definitely could see it getting nerfed just like how good it is.
It's just so much free damage, and you're gonna have. What I wonder about is if your disease tick multi-strikes can trigger it too.
I'm glad that you asked that because I've been looking at that as well myself.
Cause that's
So,
insane. Okay.
uh, so here's what I have. First of all, Wandering Plague is not able to crit itself, but its
Right.
damage is based off the corresponding tick's damage. So if the tick crits, then Wandering Plague effect is
Okay.
stronger. Wandering Plague can proc off disease multi-strikes. So
Ooh,
there's that.
okay.
Now, here's the interesting thing. As Skullflower notes, it's very powerful when talented into Necrotic Plague. It's nowhere near as good when talented, when you don't have Necrotic Plague, which leads me to believe very strongly that this trinket is balancing on the assumption that the Unholy DK will have Necrotic Plague. And that, we'll want to switch it in and out depending on when we take Necrotic Plague versus Breath of Sindragosa.
And is that interests me too, because the Necrotic Plague being 1 dot, and of course then it's spreading, of course, as it naturally does, makes this more important than actually just having both individual dots, Frost Fever and Blood Plague, and then just spreading them as you would with Blood Boil or Pestilence or whatever.
Necrotic Plague just deals a hell of a lot more damage. That's pretty much all that there is to it.
And obviously the damage that you get from the Wandering Plague is a less amount, so you'd want to use the stronger dot. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Ridiculous. You have new set bonuses coming up, and these could totally change. I have no idea. But the Frost one is coming up in 6.2. You're getting your 2-piece Frost. Your crit obliterates, give you 5% haste for 30 seconds. And then your Frost Strike crits give you a stacking bonus critical damage increase. So it's weird again, the whole Frost back and forth. It looks like Dual Frost gets a whole lot more benefit out of this than the 2-hand. And then the 4-piece one, which is we talked about this for a while last night. Killing Machine gets 2 charges, which is good and bad, but mostly bad, right?
I mean, it's hitting on the right idea, just doing it very in a bad way. So I literally just 1 day ago posted my latest article on Blizzard Watch, which talked about Killing Machine. One of the biggest problems with the proc is that you have a very high chance to overwrite it, on your next melee swing, and that's why we use it so quickly. Now, if the tier bonus had been it allows Killing Machine to stack to 2 and then gives us some other benefit, for that'd be good. But what it's doing is it's giving us 2 charges of KM. That's going to make us spam even more frenetically because now you aren't just risking overwriting 1 proc, you're risking overwriting 2 procs.
Right.
And I mean, the chance is so high that even if you've just used 1 proc, you will still waste another one because the melee swing landed before you could get that second attack off.
And I'm still a complete noob. I played DK back in Wrath when it was new, and I was like, "Woo, it's a cool class." But looking at this too, if you get 2 charges of Killing Machine and you are a Frost Death Knight, a dual-wield Frost Death Knight, you can just Howling Blast, normally, I would imagine, if you have the Runic Power available and you're good to go for it. Or you can even do Frost Strike. But what can you do if you're a 2-hand and you can only hit 1 Obliterate?
Well, just a correction here. Howling Blast is a rune ability, and Frost Strike is a Runic Power ability.
Other way around. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But besides that, I don't think it'll be much of an issue. Like, we can either spend it on Obliterate or Frost Strike, but either way, we want to get rid of these as soon as possible, so it doesn't matter what we spend it on.
But but the interaction with the 2-piece, though, like, you almost want to do 1 of each to try to get both of them, but if you're 2-hand, you want to Obliterate because it's more of your damage.
Either way, no matter what you press, it's going to be a benefit.
Right. But okay.
Yeah, and something to add to that,
Sure.
What you pick as a runic regen talent will also impact what you do in that moment.
That's true.
And we'll segue into that as we go on, but it's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's a good point, because then depending on how or what runic ability you have or how that lines up, I guess it still means, like you guys said before, like Killing Machine matters when it procs. Like, you should care about it. It's the whole point of wow, this procs up, you're like, boom. But if you get 2 charges, you want to get rid of them as soon as possible, because if it procs again, you've lost charges. And that's how I deal with Maelstrom weapon procs. You never want to cap at 5 because you just waste them.
I'd say yes and no.
Okay.
Killing Machine is, you see, and was the gist of my article. Yes, it's a gain ultimately. And this is something that's Epsilon has said, that it's definitely a gain to monitor it. The problem is that players right now are not able to map out how much of a gain. There's a huge amount of ambiguity about how much of a DPS benefit it is to align Killing Machine with the correct proc. Back in Mists of Pandaria, we had some pretty, conclusive results that said that it was just not worth waiting. So Epsilon says that it is worth waiting now. But you see, to me, this just, it speaks to how flawed this design is. A proc should never, ever be ambiguous the way that Killing Machine is, at least not a proc that's so important to a playstyle. And that's why in, for example, my Wowhead guide, I normally recommend that people just ignore it to begin with, because the risk of how much damage they would lose if they screwed it up is way higher than, if they began to try and watch swing timers.
So is there obviously a hierarchy of what to use Killing Machine on for dual wield or two-hand that is the optimal, like, greater than, greater than, greater than? Like, what's the 3 abilities in order for either one?
Well, for two-handed Frost, they want to prioritize Obliterate with their Killing Machine procs, whereas dual wants to prioritize Frost Strike.
Right. Okay. So, but that just seems so much easier to line up 2 Frost Strikes with Killing Machine procs if you have 2 of them than it is to Obliterates.
Yeah, it's definitely easier, but that's why two-handed Frost prioritizes haste, gearing, and so on, so that they have faster regen to react to these procs.
Yeah, I guess so. So the Unholy one is your 2-piece. Your Death Coil applies double the amount of Shadow Infusion onto your ghoul. And then your 4-piece is your Dark Transformation. Transform your ghoul into a crazed monstrosity. Increases both you and your ghoul's damage and attack speed. So both pretty good, pretty solid. You get a new pet. It looks cooler, I guess. I don't know what the monstrosity. Probably that weird green thing from Nax Remus.
Yeah, the 2-piece is awful.
Is it?
I mean, by itself, it's awful. Let me clarify.
Right.
Because essentially all it is you see, now, as you know, the 1 Death Coil brings 1 stack of Shadow Infusion. You need 5 stacks. You need 5 stacks of Shadow Infusion to activate Dark Transformation. So you obviously can't have 2.5 stacks of Shadow Infusion. So in practicality, what this means is that we went from 5 Death Coils to 3 Death Coils required for in order to proc DT. That is awful. However, that being said, the 4-piece is something that I know we have been requesting in some way for a very long time, whereby we've said that it would be really cool if the Death Knight themselves were to be affected by Dark Transformation, and that's what they've given us.
Right.
So I'm happy with that, but I would like to see the 2-piece get a little bit more, more love.
I mean, the Unholy new 2-piece, this is, again, Tier 18 we're talking about right now, is sort of like my Tier 17, where the 2-piece, like, by itself is... But with the 4-piece, it makes the whole thing work. So, yeah. You had something else, Skull? Oop.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here and say that I think our tier bonuses are actually pretty great, the 2-piece and the 4-piece. The 2-piece by itself, obviously, is pretty, lackluster, but it's strong in how it works with the 4-piece. It brings down having to cast 5 Death Coils to 3, and considering the fact that we can pre-pull our Runic Power and immediately stack Shadow Infusion to 5 right away, that's going to increase our uptime with Dark Transformation to probably 90% or more uptime range.
Oof. Yeah, I mean, and I don't disagree there. I mean, it's good in conjunction with the 4-piece. I just feel that it should have a greater gameplay impact on its own and not, hinge on the 4-piece so much.
Yeah. Ironically enough, the 2-piece was something that we've been complaining about a while as well. It takes a long time to ramp up your ghoul.
Sure.
And now, only needing 3 Death Coils versus the 5, it kind of touches on that. But, I'm kind of with Skull on this one. It synergizes well with the 4-piece of our tier 13. We were talking yesterday, even though we lose out on the ghoul damage bonus with the current tier, it makes up with it with the sheer uptime of it. And, we'll see what the Sims and real play show us, but I think it's a decent bonus. Not exciting, but a bonus nonetheless.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it looks like, just looking at these bonuses, Frost gets so much, but because the spec is so... it fights itself. that Unholy still might eke out to be better. Because again, just easily getting your pet buffed, and then you and your pet do more damage as you're dotting the whole world, and smooth transition to be Unholy Death Knight. That's frustrating for Frost.
Yeah, the numbers that we've data mined so far, I think it's like 15% increased damage and 10% increased attack speed. So when you consider the fact that you'll most likely get a 90% uptime on this buff, it's absolutely insane. It's going to make Unholy way overpowered, and there's no way that it's going to go live this way.
It can't, yeah, because looking at the Frost one, it's random. It's crit-based and crit-based, so yet they have to crit to even do something, whereas the Unholy one is like, you're going to Death Coil, and then you're going to transform your ghoul, so you're going to get this bonus. Like, that's it. Crits don't have to happen. So, obviously you get killing machines to get one here and there, but like, that's so weird to me. I don't know. That seems unbalanced. We'll have to see how that works out. Go PTR test it and give them feedback right now. So backing up, we'll go back to right now on live to what Unholy and Frost DPS Death Knights want for stat weights and things they care about. So we'll do Unholy first. We just done talking about them. So Unholy Death Knights, your mastery is Death Blade. You increase all shadow damage done by X percentage. And then your attunement is Necrosis, where you get plus 5% multi-strike from all sources. And then your Scourge Strike, Festering Strike, Plague Strike, Soul Reaper, and Blood Boil multi-strikes deal an additional percentage of attack power, damage, and shadow damage. That, Magdalena, these double dips, apparently.
Yeah, Necrosis basically benefits from Mastery. So when you multi-strike and cause the Necrosis effect, its power is further boosted by Mastery. So it's a pretty nice energy that's going on there, and I'm very happy that they've added it. I think my multi-strike for Unholy is in a good place, and I like it as an attunement. This is in contrast to Frost, for which I don't like it as an attunement at all. Also, I'll be right back, so go ahead and take up a Skull.
Sure, go Skull.
Yeah, based off simulations, Unholy stat priority is multi-strike over mastery, and then haste over critical strike, and lastly, versatility.
Okay.
And that's while playing with Necrotic Plague. That priority changes when you take into account Breath of Sindragosa usage or AoEing with Necrotic Plague. Like with 3 or more target AoE while using Plague, Mastery becomes more valuable than Multi-Strike. And with Breath of Sindragosa, Haste becomes more valuable than Mastery. And that's simply because Necrotic Plague benefits more from Mastery than it does Multi-Strike on 3 or more targets. And Breath of Sindragosa prioritizes Haste over Mastery because the faster rune regeneration will keep it active longer, and Mastery only affects our shadow damage, so it doesn't really do anything for breath damage, and so on.
And of course, you only mention those two, so I'm assuming like the file doesn't really fall into a matter there. I mean, we'll get into talents after the break, but...
Well, the file follows the normal stat priority that I mentioned first, but we really don't want to be using the file with how good Breath of Sindragosa is for single target.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. All right, then. Is there a weapon enchants difference between two-hand? I mean, not two-hand. We're talking about Unholy right now. Does Unholy DK just use Fallen Crusader?
Yeah, it's pretty much Fallen Crusader. You don't really have much of a choice with that.
Okay.
Like, you have Rune of Lichbane, which adds 2% weapon damage, but that just doesn't compare with the increased 20% strength increase for 15 seconds. You also have Rune of Razor Eyes, but that deals frost damage, and that doesn't appeal to Unholy.
Okay.
So it's like, we don't really have much of a choice.
Right.
Yeah, I would also caveat what Skull said with Breath of Sindragosa. It depends on how well and how good you are at gaming runic power and kind of keeping that RP generation up. It does take some skill, and it's either, you know, feast or famine with that.
Right. Chat brings up, of course, too, Skull, that Breath of Sindragosa is Shadow Frost damage, so it technically would scale with Dreadblade, as I misspoke there. So, but because you don't really care about the shadow component damage to that, because you want to make sure you get a lot of runes done to keep your runic power up to keep using Breath, right?
Yeah, it's not as strong as the bonus that you get from haste and the rune regeneration to keep Breath feeling longer.
Okay. So how... Interesting. I guess there's math involved there that I'm just not even going to...
Yeah.
I'm sure. Is that math in your write-up on SummonStone? I would hope and assume. Yeah.
No, just like simulations and stuff. I don't
get
too much into math stuff.
I just... I guess that makes sense. The two different talents then would sort of change sort of dramatically how Unholy Death Knight plays. But then I guess I would assume that Necrotic Plague would be your more AoE cleave-oriented version, whereas Breath of Sindragosa is single target. So it's very different on what fight you're playing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You pretty much want to use Breath of Sindragosa for any single target and Necrotic Plague for any 2 or more target cleave.
Okay. Gotcha. We'll shift gears to Frost Death Knights then. And as I said in the beginning of the show, Death Knights just kind of like clay models. They keep throwing globs on and smoothing it out a little bit and hope it works. Frost Death Knight's mastery is Frozen Heart. Increases all frost damage by X%. Alright? Alright. Your attunement is Icy Talons, which is not in your spellbook anywhere, and it's kind of hard to find even on the database websites. You get 20% attack speed. Then you get 10% haste. And then you get 20% more haste from all sources. So that looks like a huge band-aid. Am I wrong there? Band-aid?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm back now.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Max.
I would just say, I mean, the fact is that when 200 Frost started out, in Highmaul, we valued our attune stat very poorly. We were going for multi-strike and versatility as our primary stats, to gear for at that time. So this was a huge mandate fix about raising the value of haste. Sadly, it didn't succeed in raising the value of haste for dual wielding too much. It worked for two-handed. But, and it just, to me, it goes on, it goes back to what I've said about, I just don't think that haste is a good attunement stat for Frost. But with that being said, of course, there's more issues because of the differentiation, et cetera, et cetera. Like, if there was just one play style, then I think that Mastery would have actually made a much better choice. But that being said, that's not the case right now.
Right. Yeah, chat room brings up, I just said that was like a really big band-aid to help Frost do a thing, but it's an entire roll of gauze, actually. I don't think I've ever seen an attunement this, like, the Unholy one makes sense, right? Because it's building in, and it's just a long tooltip because it's just telling you all the different abilities that do, the extra damage. But Icy Talons is just so much power creep to try to make this spec work. Just not doing it still, apparently. Ugh. So what's your stat priority then for Frost again, just to recap? I don't know if what do you go for as dual wield Frost or two-hand Frost, Skull?
So for two-handed Frost, you want to prioritize haste over multi-strike, and then versatility over mastery, and then finally crit. Two-handed prioritizes haste because the faster rune regeneration appeals to both getting more obliterates off, which have the potential to be killing machine obliterates, and because the faster rune regen appeals to keeping Breath of Sindragosa active longer.
Right.
And the other alternatives are kind of useless in that most of your damage is going to be physical, so it doesn't benefit much from mastery. Critical Strike is also useless because we have Killing Machine, and versatility is sort of like in between these two really great stats and two really awful stats.
Yeah, it's a weird version of how crit gets scaled for certain classes, because I don't value crit at all as enhancement because of Storm Strike. And with Killing Machine, it's sort of a similar situation where you just get so much free crit value from this proc or this buff in my situation, it just becomes like a really delineated stat. It's just like, if it happens, whatever. And that's interesting too, that both Unholy and Frost, even though Frost obviously has it at a higher degree because of the two different play styles with two-hand and dual wield, but even Unholy still has your talent choice to change your, really all you can change is your enchants, maybe a trinket choice, right? There isn't a ton you can change. Weapon enchant preference then for Frost, is that still Fallen Crusader?
Yeah, for two-handed, you want Fallen Crusader for the same reasons as Unholy, and dual, you want Fallen Crusader on your main hand and Razor Ice on your offhand. And you want Fallen Crusader on your main hand because Soul Reaper only procs off main hand weapon enchants, so basically you get a slightly higher uptime doing that.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, because the offhand now with the whole like removal of hit and whatnot and expertise, your offhand's obviously going to just miss by default. That's just the penalty of dual wielding, whereas your main hand's not going to. So, all right, that makes sense. Anything else to add on stat stuff for Frost and Unholy before I move us on?
I would just have to touch on dual wield stat priority.
Sure.
Dual wield prioritizes mastery over multi-strike, and then versatility over haste, and finally crit. And dual wield prioritizes mastery because it's mostly casting Howling Blast throughout its rotation, and because mastery increases frost damage, and Howling Blast is a frost damage ability, as well as Frost Fever and Frost Strike. You'll get a much larger benefit from gearing towards that. And the other stats follow pretty much the same priority with Two-Handed Frost in that we don't want any crit because we have Killing Machine, and versatility is sort of like in between that.
Okay. It's good that you have all this knowledge of Frost, even though, like, there's almost, like, no reason to play it right now unless you'd like it, I guess.
Well,
it's so
we will
sad
play
to
it in
say.
6.2, so...
Right, yeah, we'll see how that switches. It's going to be really weird, though, if you went with... Is that going to be a fight-to-fight situation, though, Skull?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be, like, it's looking right now in its current tuning that we're going to play Two-Handed Frost for single target fights and Unholy for cleave.
Okay. But that sort of then makes sense, too, because the other strength class is, at least for Arms Warrior and Fury Warrior, you kind of do the same thing. Arms is more for cleave and AoE, and then Fury is more for single target. So at least maybe they're getting there where you can actually have the back and forth-ing of Unholy and Frost. Maybe. Hopefully. We'll see. We'll have to just see. Anything else, Mags?
No, not really. I mean, I'm a little dubious about how much playtime Frost will see because while it is very powerful single target-wise, as Skull has said, the fact is that Unholy still has a great deal more versatility when it comes to things like picking its level 100 talents. I mean, I'm not sure if you already covered this, but Necrotic Plague barely breaks even for Frost, to the point where you're still better off taking Defile or Breath. And then with Breath, it's fine for two-handed, but you never want to take Breath as dual-wielding. Unholy, meanwhile, can justify taking any of the three talents, depending on the fight, and perform pretty well with them.
Right. Yeah, it's that. I mean, we're going to go to a little break here and then come back to do 200 talents, and we'll see that a little more in detail. But that's a whole other bandage of gauze and ball of wax, as it were. So, Naz, anything you want to touch on there?
No, I think Mags and Skull said everything that needed to be said. There's, Frost and Unholy has always been a rough relationship with each other. When they tend to buff one spec, even though they're trying to bring it even to each other, they tend to over buff. And so that's why you see the swing between Unholy and Frost every tier. This is probably the second or third tier that Unholy's actually had a decent showing at. Usually it's been Frost.
Right. Yeah, it does seem like it's been swinging a pendulum back and forth over the course of the last expansion and now into the patches here. So is that... I wonder, because I haven't talked to mages and warlocks yet, and I'm sure they'll have something to talk about in this regard. Hunters had a similar thing, where they all started off marksman, and then went survival, now they're all beast mastery. And then they're going back, I think, survival or marksman in the next tier. I don't know. Obviously I just have an enhancement shot, and my talents move around, but I don't have to spec move like you guys do. That's strange with these more pure DPS classes and how the balance works out, but alrighty. I want to take a moment real quick to tell you guys about some awesome communities and some things behind the scenes and give you guys some information for your brain cages. If you are a Death Knight and are not part of the Acherus IRC yet, why not? You go to sonofalich.com and click on this button right here, and then you're in. You make a username, and you go for it. And then you're in this awesome chat room. I'm not going to log in right now because, I might not even load because it's probably going to crash by the time I get there. In before I crash Son of a Lich, I'm sorry. But right here, the Acherus IRC chat. If you want to ask questions, talk to people, get in part of this community. Not every class in Spec has a great place to go and talk about your class, so do that right here. I'm going to leave it right there. Right there. Additionally, of course, if you've missed any Final Boss podcasts or any of our episodes, all of our podcasts are hosted through Stitcher and iTunes on our website. You can go to FinalBoss.tv for all of that stuff right here in the audio-only format. Of course, if you want the YouTube version, which is the archive, you can do that on our YouTube page. All of our playlists are there. All of my goofy stuff. All of Final Boss TV in 2015 for the after show. All the 2014 stuff we did. All of our 2013. All right there. There is a little bit of content on our YouTube page. I'm just going to scroll for a minute. Just going to Just gonna scroll for a minute. Another little bit here. We keep going. Yeah, so you can go check out our YouTube page if you've missed anything and want to dig around in there for other classes you may not have seen before. But then this other website just came out of nowhere recently. We've been talking about it a little bit. It's called SummonStone.com. I don't if you guys have heard about this yet. Skullflower, what's SummonStone.com, sir? What is this thing? What have
No,
I found?
I haven't heard of it. Where'd you find this website?
I haven't heard of it. It's only my every waking moment right now, right?
Yeah. So SummonStone is sort of like my personal project that's sort of evolved from when I made hornofwinter.com. And Horn of Winter was just like a guide page for my Death Knight guides. And people approached me and they're like, hey, I want a website like this for my class guide. And so that gave me the idea to like bring in all these top players and top theory crafters and put together all these awesome guides for you guys.
Yeah. And it's all filling in eventually. Just like, say, for example, if you're, like, I've been a Frost DK for so long, why am I doing it wrong? So go to Unholy. These guides are rather in depth. I'm going to say there is tons of information on them. Ability breakdowns, Necrotic Plague, Breath of Syndragosa, Defile, Priority List, Talents, Glyphs, Gear, Stats, Add-ons and Macros, Boss Guides, and Simulations. And that's just for Unholy. I'm sure the Frost one is as detailed. Yep. Priority List, Rotations, Talents, Glyphs, Gear, Stats, all this stuff. And they're really clean and just well organized and put together. And for one, I'm sure many people have gone out there and like, I want to look for guides and look up, how to play this class better. And sometimes it's a little bit too. I'm not hitting on blogs too much here, but sometimes it's hard to get through everything out there. And these are just well put together. All the different links and resources you have put together here are really well thought out and really good. And obviously, you'll be keep updating these as the patches go forward.
Yeah, of course.
And
we're planning on putting 6.2 information on every guide pretty soon, so check that out.
Is it going to be linked in the same place, or is there going to be like a different like tab that'll link to 6.2 stuff?
We'll likely like put in a tab that says 6.2 patch information or something like that.
Okay.
Near the top.
Right. Because right now, obviously, it's all current. But then as 6.2 comes out, you'll kind of roll away what's on currently and then update things for 6.2.
Yeah, and every guide page also has like a changelog sort of thing, so you can see what we changed, what the guide writers added or removed, and so on.
And there even is forums too. So how have the forums worked out? That's a new feature you just added. How is the forums working out for you so far?
The forums are working out pretty well. I think we've got around 1,000 users or so far. So I think they're getting pretty popular. Okay. And we plan on hosting like a bunch of theory crafting discussion there for every class and every spec. So you should definitely check that out. All the guide writers there are hosting topics of their own. You can ask them questions. They'll respond to you. Some of them are actually doing log analysis, so you can get a lot of information from these forums.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it looks great. I think that the biggest thing to me is just the aesthetic of how clean it is and how organized it's going to be. And of course, you have so much coming soon as well. I had to plug you for earlier. Who's doing the Enhancement Shaman guide? So is Purge slaving away at that? Yeah. Should be good. Should be good. Do you have the ETA on when you'll have all the other guides up and running?
We actually have a lot of the guides that aren't up there nearly finished. Like, I think the next guide release is going to be a huge package of all the remaining guides that we have yet to release.
Okay. Yeah, it should be good. Because obviously there are some holes currently, but we need to get them all out before 6.2. But I guess it takes a lot of just like organization and time and make sure everything's tweaked before you just like pop it up there. So, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of organizing and talking with the guide writers, formatting the pages. There's so much that goes into writing every single guide that it's really time consuming to get these out there right away.
Okay. Gotcha. I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Who's writing for Rogues?
Who's writing for Rogues? It's Vigilant and Ninja Blaze.
Very nice. How about Warriors for DPS?
Warriors, we have one of our new warrior trials in Midwinter, Zach, and we have Decima, and then we have Archimedos.
Yes, Archie. Yep. Awesome. So not all these guides are written by one person though. Sometimes there's a good collaboratory effort going on, right?
Yeah, some of them are collab guides. Like the Guardian Druid guide is being written by two people.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the name, Ariel and another one. And I'm sorry if I forgot your name and you're watching.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, it's a lot of work to do, and I appreciate all the time. I mean, we've been doing this show now for almost 2 years, and we've come across a lot of great information out there, and there's a good place that's like right there. So to get all these class guides to go forward. So thank you for your blood, sweat, and tears, and all the authors' fingertips for typing all this information out. Very good.
No problem.
Awesome stuff. All right, boys, it's time for 100 talents. You ready for this?
Yep.
That
Sure.
resounding silence. Yeah, I'm hoping a little bit that there's some reason for choice here in the different tiers, but we'll have to see. Level 100 talents for Death Knights are Necrotic Plague, which combined both Blood Plague and Frost Fever, and is applied by any ability which applies either, so you have 1 dot going. And what it does is that it does Shadow Frost damage, so for Unholy it's going to do more Shadow, and if you're Frost it'll do more Frost. And then it does damage every 2 seconds for 30 seconds. Each time it deals damage, though, it gains a stack and infects another nearby enemy within 8 yards, if possible. So it jumps around a lot, super dot, jumping and dotting the world. Defile is just super death and decay that grows in damage and size whenever it deals damage, and then it pops away at the same duration death and decay is. And then Breath of Sindragosa, which is pretty much the Blood Death Knight's best friend right now, is just you continuously deal attack power base Shadow Frost damage in front of you every 1 second for ever, almost, at certain seams, in a 12-yard radius. Reduces damage, of course, to secondary targets, and will continue breathing as long as you have runic power to burn. So, for Frost, first off, who wants to delve into the fact that you can't really use Breath of Sindragosa as Frost?
I
At least
mean,
dual
you can
wield?
use it. You can use it as two-handed, sure. As
Yes.
dual wielding, it's. I mean, it's simple math over here. Breath of Sindragosa consumes runic power. Frost Strike also consumes runic power, and Frost Strike is a huge portion of your damage.
Yep.
So the true gain of trading off Frost Strike for Breath of Sindragosa is much lower than what it would be for, say, trading off Frost Strike for two-handed. And the fact over here is that Breath of Sindragosa is not a true AoE, it's a pseudo AoE because it deals reduced damage to secondary targets.
Right.
This means that you would primarily use Breath of Sindragosa in, maybe like 1 or 2, maybe predominantly for single target, maybe say 2 or 3 targets occasionally. And in those cases, I mean, you're losing out on a lot of Frost Strikes. And it's worth noting that Breath of Sindragosa also does not interact with Killing Machine in any way, which is ridiculous to me because it does interact with, with Shadow Infusion for Unholy. It interacts with Shadow of Death for Blood. I don't know why it doesn't interact in any way with Killing Machine for Frost.
So I was talking to you about before, like, I don't know why Killing Machine can't proc during Breath of Sindragosa and just give you, like, the next, like, 2 or 3 ticks for free. So you can actually get a Frost Strike in, Like, that's so awkward to me. So for dual wield Frost, then, what do you suggest? Is that Defile and Necrotic Plague, then? Does that work for dual wield Frost?
Sadly, Necrotic Plague is also pretty undertuned, as in, it's not that it's not a gain, it's just a much smaller gain compared to others. The only real choice for dual wielding is Defile, and that's pretty much all there is to it.
It takes an Unholy Rune, so on a 30-second cooldown, last 10 seconds, you just plop it down on cooldown. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically a glorified version of Death and Decay. It's usually the most boring of the level 100 talents.
Yeah. Now for two-hand Frost, it changes a little bit. You can actually kind of make use of Breath of Sindragosa, right?
Yes.
So
You can. I mean, it's nice dump runic power. It deals high damage, and the fact that two-handed Frost also uses Devil Rune Strikes as its main damage is good over here because if you're Unholy, then you're Skirt Striking, or yes, you can also Festering Strike as well, but you're Skirt Striking predominantly, and that's only generating 10 runic power per rune. Here with Obliterator, you're actually doing 24 runic power because of Frost Presence. And so you're able to. It's a lot more comfortable to sustain it as 200 Frost, put it that way.
Right. And then the other choices then for two-handed Frost, what would you'd say? Just go still Defile, Necrotic Plague, still not going to be a big deal.
Yeah, Necrotic Plague is not a thing. So yeah, choose between Defile and Breath of Sindragosa as two-handed.
Right. Okie dokie. So then for Unholy, then Skull, what? Is it just Necrotic Plague, all the things for Unholy?
Unholy is just like the jack of all trades. You can pick whichever talent you want, but ideally you should use Breath of Sindragosa for single target, and if you don't know how to use the Breath rotation, then you could use Defile. You could also use Necrotic Plague. It's still viable, but not as good as Breath of Sindragosa. And for AoE, you should definitely use Necrotic Plague.
And that's just that easy?
Yeah, pretty much.
Why does Frost have so many problems?
Well, the only reason that it's a good talent for Unholy is because we have Festering Strike, and that allows us to extend it as much as we need to.
Right.
For example, the current playstyle with Unholy is called Necrotic Blight, and that basically extends our plague as long as possible until Unholy Blight's cooldown is up. That maximizes the amount of time that our plague is at 15 stacks and deals significantly more damage than without extending it. Now, if you try to do that with Frost, you simply can't. There's nothing to extend it, and so the uptime that Necrotic Plague will be up at 15 stacks will be pretty low, which is why we don't take that talent.
Yeah.
A good example of what Skull described is if you have an Unholy DK on Chromog, and if the DK is extending that Necrotic Plague at, keeping that 15 stack up, and when the hands come up and the DK blood boils, you'll see that DK just shoot up the damage meters.
A little bit.
Yeah. But that's the example of why Necrotic Plague and Festering Strike is so strong for Unholy.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and Frost has no interaction with Necrotic Plague other than just like you just never have to hit on Plague Strike, I guess. Or that's all you do, because when you Howling Blast, you'll apply Necrotic Plague.
Yeah, pretty much, and that's a sad thing. I mean, this is why I'm going to say something a little controversial here. This is why I've been a very strong proponent of Necrotic Plague, becoming an Unholy only baseline, ability, because I don't think that either Blood or Frost really can compete with what it offers Unholy, because Unholy has unique mechanics that suit Necrotic Plague.
Right.
Neither Frost nor Blood can claim the same thing.
Well, now, I don't know if I would... Controversial, yeah, because I don't know if I would think that Necrotic Plague should be baseline, but I'm looking at it as, look at any other class, almost every other class in the game. When you switch between specs, some of the talents change. Nothing changes for Death Knight. Nothing. So why wouldn't Necrotic Plague be available for Unholy, but then something else be there for Frost? Because, like, Frost, again, has some interaction that they can use Breath of Sindragosa, or you can go Defile, but then why isn't something there for Frost that is not there for Unholy? Like, this is one of the classes that doesn't have any change in their talent tree. So
the only reason that I could guess why they have it that way is because they want to reduce the amount of complexity between these specs, or they probably don't want to make a huge mechanical change in between patches and so on. They sort of like leave those huge changes for expansion packs.
Right. No, I'll agree. Even though I don't agree on the whole complexity thing, because that's where I've always been like arguing about. It's like how they're thinking of making the game more complex by fixing these sort of things. They make it more complex, in my opinion, because they remove the ability for people to see what the hell their classes do by removing things from the spell book and putting so much crap on one giant tooltip. That we'll see if that changes, but that's pretty definitive answer. So both specs can use Defile. Just if you're not going to be able to game your runic power well enough, unless you're dual wield Frost, you can't use Breath of Sindragosa. You're just stuck with Defile. I guess that's super boring.
I wouldn't say that you can't use it. I think it's still as viable as Defile, but it's not going to be as great as two-handed Frost using Breath.
Right. Yeah, because you just get, if I'm not mistaken, is it Obliterate still 2 runes?
Yeah.
So you're going to just gain more runic power.
It's way easier to keep Breath active as two-handed than it is with the wield.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Naz, what have your talent choices been during progression right now? What have you been using?
I've been bouncing between Breath and Necrotic Plague. With Breath, I'm still pretty rusty with it. I've been doing LFR just to get practice soaking with AMS, because it does take it takes a certain mentality, because you're actively running into the bad stuff to soak RP.
Right.
And so, you got to get into that mindset and keeping it up. I mean, there's some degenerate rays right now that people are using to keep RP coming in. I won't talk about it, but it's, Breath is one of those things where it's a high payoff if you do it well.
Sure, right. And would all of you kind of agree right now that I guess Blood Death Knight gets the most ease and use and benefit from breath?
I'm not going to say ease. I'm going to say that it
Oh.
has the most ability. It has the, I should say, it has the ability to prolong breath for the longest, and that
Sure.
is its own. I mean, that's just a very long topic that I could spend on for hours. So let's not go into
Sure.
that right now.
Is there a break point? Because this is such a weird talent. Is there a break point where Breath of Sindragosa, like it has to be up for so much of a duration to make it worth it? Because it's a 2-minute cooldown. If you pop it, it lasts for 10 seconds. I'm sure it's like not a good.
Yes,
use of the
absolutely. No, Reniath recently did some math for blood DKs to determine how many ticks of Breath of Sindragosa you would need for it to compare to Defile and to compete with Defile. That's also the case for Unholy and Frost. It's just that we have the benefit of Breath of Sindragosa also scaling with our mastery.
Sure.
So the difference isn't as exaggerated, I'd say.
Okay. So then I guess what's like the duration you would like to shoot for, depending on what you're using Breath of Sindragosa for? Like how many seconds we talking here? Like what's Skullflower boast a little bit? How long have you kept Breath of Sindragosa active?
That all depends on like your timing of the ability and if you're soaking something with AMS, and if you have Empower Rune Weapon up, for example. Empower generates 25 runic power, so that's 1.5 extra ticks, and AMS soaking something like Nitro Fuel gives you a full runic power bar, so combined with that you get 8 extra ticks. And if you're a Blood Elf, you can use Arcane Torrent, so that's another extra tick.
You shut up, Blood Elves, yeah.
Overall, I think your average length of breath will last around maybe to 15 or 20 ticks, maybe even more.
Oof.
But that all depends on the things that I mentioned.
That's a long time. It's good to see that anti-magic shell soaking is still a DPS gain. Oh man, that ability too. That was a fun talk at Mesa Pandaria talking about what to abuse that with, but it's good that it's still there. That's good. All right then, I guess we come to it. I'm going to talk first about level 56 talents, if there's anything really here that needs to be really discussed. So Plague Bearer, Plague Leech, and Unholy Blight. For Frost first, is there... This is weird.
It's an awkward talent
it's
tree.
Plague Leech. Yeah, it's
Yep.
it's Plague Leech or bust all day.
Why is that? Why is that, Megs?
I mean, simply because, first of all, you have a tier that's focused on diseases in a lopsided fashion. Now, Plague Bearer is a horrible talent. It extends the disease duration, and I mean, it's horrible for all 3 specs. It's just not nearly the same, performance gain as any of the other talents.
Right.
Unholy Blight only becomes interesting with Necrotic Plague because it stacks it up very fast.
Sure.
So that makes it viable for Unholy, but for Frost, when you have your diseases doing almost no damage, then it's not nearly as exciting. Then you have Plague Leech, which is unique because it generates resources. It doesn't just, add DPS. It generates resources,
Yep.
and that's huge. That's why we pair Plague Leech with Breath of Sindragosa so often, because that's more resources for you to create more runic power on.
Right.
Plague Leech is just ridiculous. It's very powerful, and it's a pity that it is, and I'm going to stray a bit from the topic and just say that, it's not that Death Knights have bad talents. We have some very, very good and interesting talents. What we have is bad choices, because among those good talents, you have a couple of other, of competing talents that are just, that just don't jive well with the spec for whatever reason.
Yeah. And it's the same thing I said before about Death Knights. I think every show is that there are so many things they give you, and they don't always seem to do the same thing. Like each tier should be something that's thematic. If it's going to be disease oriented, right? That's how it should be. But they obviously there's one that generates resources, the other 2 don't. So that's unbalanced right there. They should all just worry about diseases and how they spread or how they work or how they interact or how long they last, something like that. So, and then anti-magic zone, which is a raid cooldown, is within a personal survivability thing. Like, why is DK like that? I just don't... It's so awkward to me.
Yeah, like just for example, when you look at Plague Bearer, it's just a completely useless talent. Like any resources saved from the disease extension component just doesn't compare to the 2 rune return from Plague Leech.
On a
And
25-second cooldown.
Yeah, and it's even more useless for Unholy since we already have Festering Strike. And the other thing to consider is that Necrotic Plague stacking component just doesn't compare to how quickly Unholy Blight stacks it. I think on average it stacks the Plague to maybe 15 stacks in 20-ish seconds, whereas Unholy Blight is 9 seconds. And that's a more consistent number, whereas Plague Bearer depends on your runic power generation and so on.
Ooh.
And this talent has never been useful at all, ever since it was implemented. And if you know someone that's using it, you should probably slap them around or something, because it's just a horribly designed talent and 100% useless.
Right. It's the weirdest frustration to me. Like, your 57 talents, Lichborn and Purgatory makes sense. AMZ should be baseline, you need another personal survivability thing here. 58 is a movement, a slow, and a sort of stun / interrupt. Like, what? Like, what? Is it all movement or anti-movement or utility? Cool. Like, I don't. The one that makes sense is 57 and 60, which we've come to it now. Blood Tap, Runic Empowerment, and Runic Corruption. There's always sort of a argument here that Blood Tap is all the things.
I'm going to put this very simply. We had a very long discussion about this in IRC. I mean, okay, so it's going to be split into a couple of components, but let's begin with this. Nav, one of the developers for Simcraft, who is a member of Acherus and is in our IRC, also confirmed that the problem with trying to model Blood Tap is that the sim undervalues how powerful control is by a huge amount.
Right.
Because what is beautiful about Blood Tap is that it is so versatile. The player, the player's ability and skill to control it is what defines it, and that level of control is just it only manifests on different encounters. So when you try and sim that, it's not going to give you very good results. If you try and sim that on Patchwork, it'll essentially treat Blood Tap like a glorified version of Runic Empowerment, and that's pretty much it. And then, of course, I should mention that in patch 6.1, thanks to some fixes to Reaping for both Blood and Holy DKs, Blood Tap now not only it converts all 6 runes to Death runes, which is very much an unintended side effect, but just further increases its appeal. And even if this wasn't the case, I would argue that Blood Tap is still by far the strongest talent, and I would. If you're looking to improve on your DK, if you're looking to min-max, then Blood Tap is really something that you guys need to get familiar with.
Yeah. So every 15 runic power you spend will generate a blood charge. You can have 12 charges. When you consume a Blood Tap, you remove 5 blood charges to activate a random, fully depleted rune as a death rune. So you get 2 max, right? But what did you say about you can get all of them?
What I was saying was that the way in which yes, you can indeed get those runes, returned as death runes, but the thing here is that there are certain runes that it previously didn't really affect that much, as in it would always prioritize other runes instead. Now it's begun to prioritize those runes by default. So, for example, Unholy DKs can get 6 death runes for AoE. Blood Death Knights can get 6 death runes, and just do nothing but death strike spam. Although that's not optimal, but it's just something that's not intended, but it's just another reason as to why Blood Tap is so good.
Oh, so you're saying it's possible now for Blood Tap to actually turn the runes. Let's say if you're a Blood Death Knight, you don't necessarily want your blood runes turned to death runes because you're going to use them anyway because they're blood runes. But will it actually prioritize like the frost and then holy runes, which frees up, again, like you said, more death striking?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and once you've got them all converted to death runes, you can also, then maintain them infinitely. For example, as Unholy, if I keep spamming Blood Boil, then those runes will come back as death runes. As Blood, if I keep spamming Death Strike, then those runes will again come back as death runes. They won't come back as Unholy or Blood runes, respectively, as they normally should.
Gotcha.
I mean, a great example in 6.2 would be if you're two-handed Frost, you just obliterate it on a killing machine. You could double tap and obliterate again on a killing machine. So that's one of the big benefits of Blood Tap.
Right.
It's that you can control what you need, when you need it, and how often. With Unholy, it's an on-demand death rune that you can weave in with Soul Reaper, and that's, I think, one of the biggest strengths of it for Unholy.
I'm assuming Blood Tap is off the GCD?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so within like a second, you can tap and then have your runes right back again, like you just said, to kind of balance that timing. Is there any other? What are the other strengths? Like, what's runic empowerment is what Skull talked about. So what's the difference there? Where does runic empowerment fall into this thing? Because I would assume that runic corruption is still awful.
Actually, I would say that runic corruption is better than runic empowerment. Runic empowerment is by far the worst design talent. I would, I'm going to use very strong language here. It is by far the worst design Death Knight talent.
Wow.
It tries to offer, because you see, you have runic corruption that is completely passive and just speeds up rune regen.
Sure.
And you have blood tap that is, full control. Then you have runic empowerment, which is trying to be the best of both worlds and failing utterly, because first of all, it doesn't return death runes, it returns normal runes. Secondly, there's no concept of pooling or charging. There's very little flexibility. I mean, it's an awful talent, and you should never be I'll put it this way. Anything that runic empowerment can do, macroed blood tap, macroed I'm saying over here, can match or exceed. So there's,
wow.
Frankly, if you're that desperate for something that's passive, then just macro blood tap. That's all I'm going to say.
Really? So what is your thoughts on that then, Skull?
So if you simulate it right now, I think you'll find that all three talents are pretty much on par with each other, but that's just completely wrong in a realistic scenario. The simulation only has like 3 or 4 lines with using blood tap in the action priority list. And that's for like combining it with Soul Reaper and using it before you overcap your charges. But that's only part of how we actually use blood tap. One of the biggest things is that blood tap causes what is known as rune desyncing. And rune desync is when you have like a frost rune that's recharging as death, and then you use blood tap, that rune will refresh back to frost when it gets used up.
Okay.
So instead of the 2 death runes that you would have had if you let the runes naturally recharge, you instead have 2 death runes and then 1 frost rune after it recharges, meaning the net gain of that blood tap was a frost rune that you can't really easily pair with the blood rune because that'll most likely be recharging as death, and you don't want to waste that on a festering strike. But you can easily avoid this desync by using blood tap when your runes are recharging as blood or frost, or using it to game unholy death runes. And so this is a pretty big issue because we can't really work around that in a simulation because the APLs would just be way too complex, and I feel that it probably would be never perfect no matter how we write it.
Exactly, because again, it's A, encounter specific, and B, it's player specific.
Yeah, that, and it's even situationally specific too, because it seems like blood tap just still is this. If you know how to min-max the use of the rune regeneration, then blood tap is going to be like the best thing ever. Because you can really game, like you said, you can make sure you have the next runes coming up that aren't the ones you don't need with blood tap. Boy, it sounds like to me. Like I have no idea, but that sounds really good. Yeah, runic empowerment's so random. It's just like a random chance, so you can't even bank on it. And then runic corruption again is just increases the rune regeneration speed by 100% for 3 seconds. So I guess those are really the 2 choices.
Yeah, like if you want to use runic empowerment, I guess you could, like if you don't know how to use blood tap correctly, but you would have to change up your playstyle completely in that you would have to pull your resources to proc the correct runes and so on. It's actually just a really awful talent. You should avoid it altogether.
Okay. So now, do runic corruption and blood tap just sort of work with any of the level 100 talent interactions, or are there better ones to pair together?
I mean,
Well,
go
ahead.
I was going to say that, for example, with Breathos and Dragosa, given that you want something that's consistent and that, always you can rely on to give you back runes at the right time to get, to generate more runic power, you want blood tap, in most cases.
Sure. Makes sense. Interesting. There's a lot going on there. I think the most complex part about DKs is that rune to runic power interaction. Which, that's good that that's a complex part of the class, because that's sort of your resources. I say you have 2 resources. You guys say you actually have, like, what, 5? So, yeah, that's, Interesting. I like it. I like it. I have no idea how it works, but it's a thing.
Honestly, I think DKs, especially Unholy DK, is one of the most complex classes to play. Like, out of all the alts that I've played, Unholy DK is just one of the most complex, I have to say.
Because of like the resource management and how best to use your runes to runic power ratio and where your timing comes in, or
Yeah, it's just because of
Pretty
all
much
this
all
like,
of that, yeah.
micromanagement.
yeah. Because like I have no weird interactorial mechanics. I have 2 random reset procs and an ammo system as enhancement, and I have like a prioritized list of what I have to hit in what order to maximize my damage. But there's no like background craziness, right? But I've always said that enhancement is a pretty strict melee class to learn because you're always watching a lot of things. But I've never heard that from Unholy that it actually is an incredibly demanding mechanical class in that regard. I'm sure you can probably just play it and just like get by with hitting things as it comes off cooldown, but you're obviously talking about min-maxing your rune to runic power regeneration and making sure the right death runes comes back up and using blood tap properly. So crazy.
Yeah, the basics are really easy to understand, but if you really want to min-max and master the class, it's just really, really difficult.
Awesome. Well, anything else on talents that you want to touch on real quick? Are there any glyphs maybe that are important to bring up?
Let's go take this one.
Not really. I mean, you always want to be using Glyph of Blood Boil whenever there's 2 or more targets because it increases the range of your damage and disease spread. You want to use Regenerative Magic because it allows for more frequent uses if it doesn't completely absorb all magic damage. And your last slot is kind of situational, but most of the time you want to be using Glyph of Raise Ally to remove the cost of battle resing.
That's true. That's a good one. How much does Raise Ally normally cost? 30?
I think it's 25 or 30, I don't recall.
Right. That's not bad. I guess it's kind of weird in the first place that you need to use a glyph to remove that cost, but
And there are better battle reses out there.
oh, of course there are. That's the one thing that's interesting about when we call for battle reses sometimes. We actually didn't have any druids in the raid the other day. We had a DK and a warlock, and the DK was like, wait, I need a GCD or 2 to res, and the warlock gets it in the time. That's like no other classes to worry about like that resource. If you obviously might have a glyph because you're not paying attention to it, but that should just not cost anything. That's just kind of a weird crutch. I don't know. It's strange. But those are like the 3 big ones. Is there a trap glyph that no one should use? I've heard of this, maybe? No,
I'll let Magdalena answer this.
It's right here. I'm hovering close to it. I'm almost there. Oh,
of course, the Glyph of Outbreak. Yeah, you don't ever want to use that because it's literally a direct DPS loss. The trade-off value for applying diseases for 30 runic power, I mean, that's just a very dumb idea. Don't do it.
Just dumb. Don't do it. Right. Just nope. Yeah, looking at this on the outside, I just don't know why you'd even need Outbreak to have no cooldown. Are disease management that hard to deal with? I can imagine not.
Well, that's kind of why I was saying that I think that Plague Strike and ITJ should be pruned, because I think Outbreak with no cooldown baseline would be, would work just fine.
Gotcha. Anything else talent-wise you want to discuss real quick? Anything else that I've missed or glanced over here?
Maybe we should touch on Glyphs of Chains of Ice.
Oh gosh, you really want to?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a pretty big subject.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple here, guys. Look, you've likely seen Blood Death Knights use Glyph of Chains of Ice to maximize uptime of Breath of Centrigosa. Please don't do this as a DPS. It's a very bad idea. It's overall lower DPS, and breath, while important, it's just not worth the trade-off for all the potential obliterates and skirt strikes that you could be doing.
So don't do it as a DPS, but do it as a Blood Death Knight.
Correct.
Right. I can't imagine the GCD spam you'd have to work into when you're already looking at, being pretty capped in that regard with your runes and everything else and paying attention to that. Ugh, gross. So, no Chains of Ice Glyph if you're a DPS. No. But if you're Blood Death Knight, you'll go crazy. Go crazy. All right, then. So, soapbox time. Naz, you want anything in the soapbox to give to the DK community real quick before we get out of here?
No, I think I'm pretty good. Just want to again bump Skullflower's side and Acherus. Please come to us for any questions or just general DK theory crafting discussion. I think DKs have one of the better communities out there. I think the IRC is part of that. Not because I'm a mod, but because
Of course.
but just because there is a lot of discussion, and it's not a lot of, I think this, but it's a lot of math based, it's a lot of things based on what actual play is.
Concrete
stuff.
Yes. Good. Yeah, I can't plug that place enough. Every DK episode that comes up, if you're a DK that wants to get part of this community, go for it. Skullflower, soapbox time, sir. What you got?
I would have to agree with Naz. Acherus is just like one of the best communities you can have in a game ever. I would definitely join right away if you're a Death Knight player or you're interested in playing Death Knight. We'll help you out.
Anything else?
Suffer well.
Suffer well. I like it. Good. All right, Magdalena. This is you can fit in a couple rants right now. Go for it.
I mean, I pretty much just this would be addressed to anybody from Blizzard who's watching. I'm arrogant enough to believe, of course, that they're watching us right now or that they will watch us. Our class is fantastic. It's awesome, but there are some pretty big fundamental flaws with talents and glyphs, and I sincerely hope that 7.0 is where you look at this and understand why we've been complaining about this for so long. Because with an improved talent system and more interesting glyphs, I think that we could hands down become the best class in WoW, bar none.
Oh, well, okay then. No, I get that. I mean, that was like the main part of the show, is that there just seems to be so many, like, again, it's just like piles of clay and things and just like slapping things on there, man. It definitely needs something on both. So we'll have to see. Obviously, because Blood Death Knight's also unplayable, so, buff Blood Death Knight or whatever. So, all right then. I think button time, gentlemen. It's come to it. It's right there. There it is. Thank you all very much for watching this episode of Final Boss TV. Of course, anything you need to know about Final Boss TV is on, wait for it, on FinalBoss.tv. Our new website is still being worked on. We have the awesome Warlords favorite page coming soon that'll list all these great little communities and links to their websites and yada, yada, yada. But enough of that. Our guests today were Magdalena from Something Wicked. You can go, of course, to sonofalitch.com and go to the Acherus IRC channel or follow him on Twitter at Magdalena DK. Always a pleasure, sir.
Anytime. Got to be on.
We had Skullflower as well from Midwinter, the creative brain behind SummonStone. And you can go follow him on Twitter at SkullflowerDK, and of course go read the SummonStone guides and bother him in the Acherus IRC. Thank you, sir. It was awesome.
Thank you for having me.
And then, oh, there it is. We have the arch mod or nemesis of Magdalena, or stalker, I guess, one of the two. Nazuvious.
The eternal stalker.
Eternal stalker.
He wishes.
Absolutely. Nazuvious
Hey,
also.
you wish.
Oh my. Also on Twitter at Nazuvious. And in the Death Knight IRC Acherus, you can find on there. Thank you for being on the show, sir. Your top hat's excellent.
Thank you.
He's missing
Thank you for having me.
Where's the monocle? Wait, get it quickly.
Yeah, I got you that monocle.
Yes. Very, very good. And we all thank you so much for watching this episode. If you have questions for our guests, you can send them on Twitter at FinalBossTV. We'll be back for an after show after a short break. Next week, Retribution Paladins. We'll be sitting down with Bear, Hunting Bear, as you also may know him. And also with, oh my god, I'm going to ruin the name. Here it comes. Solsacra from Vodka will be here. No?
Solsacra.
Solsacra. It's that hard A. Solsacra over here. Damn it. We'll be here next week to talk about Retribution Paladins. Thank you all so much. We'll see you there. And, yeah, trusting your seal of tempered fate. Soon to be something new now in 6.2. We'll see when that happens. But next, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Tip your top hat at the audience. Tip it. Tip the top hat there. Yes, perfect.